Good morning, everybody. It's Monday, therefore it must be a Reform UK press conference. I do hear rumours that one or two members of the press don't even bother to take their passes off now. So many conferences do we do. Before the main event today, a couple of quick comments. I am quite a good friend of Reza Pahlavi. Quite what the final settlement would be in Iran if this revolution succeeds, I don't know, but I do believe him to be a positive and helpful influence. It is obviously tragic that so many people have been killed over the last few days, wholly unsurprising, and perhaps a lot of the silence we get from our establishment is, of course, because they all backed the JCPOA deal back in 2015, which I was vehemently opposed to, which frankly has done nothing more than prolong the life of this absolutely monstrous regime. Also, quickly want to touch on our friends in Brussels and the Farage clause. You would have to be a prime minister that had no feeling, no understanding of something called the national interest to sign up to something for which we could be punished if a subsequent elected government took a different view. But then, given what this prime minister has done on the Chagos Islands and much else, I don't think national interest really comes into his vocabulary. Far more worried about what globalist institutions may think of him. Now, today we are announcing a very senior political figure and business figure who is joining our team. I know that the sketch writers will go on saying that we're a one-man band. It doesn't matter how many women we get elected. It doesn't matter how many senior figures from all walks of life join us. For some reason, the one-man band narrative seems to have stuck, but it's nonsense, I promise you. So before I introduce our guest for today, our new defector today, I'm going to show you a short video about who he is. Born in Baghdad. My memoirs are called The Boy from Baghdad. Not a bit. Lovely room, wasn't it? Go for it.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here today to tell you all, and of course the British people, that Britain needs reform. Britain needs Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. I know this may come as a surprise to my old party and to many Westminster watchers, but it really shouldn't. And it certainly won't come as a shock to the tens of millions of hard-working, patriotic, decent people up and down our wonderful United Kingdom, from the Highlands of Scotland to the bottom of Cornwall, from rural Wales to the beating heart of London. We can all see that our beautiful, ancient, kind, magical island story has reached a dark and dangerous chapter. Things may feel like they're ticking along just fine within a few square miles of where we stand today. But in so much of the rest of the country, the sickness is no surprise to anyone. To anyone trying to get a doctor's appointment, to anyone who wants to express an opinion, whether on X or even just down the pub, to anyone who wants their children to be taught facts, not harmful fictions at school, to anyone just trying to earn a living and not get crushed into the dirt by ever-growing taxes. Even if you don't yet realize that Britain needs reform, you know in your heart of hearts that our wonderful country is sick. How many of you at home have thought to yourselves that nothing works today? I know I have, and I have it a damn sight easier than most people. That is why I'm standing here today as the newest member of Reform UK. I could very easily spend the rest of my life back in business, which I've been enjoying since leaving Parliament 18 months ago. Many will know that I have done some, from the beginning of the most difficult period in government, that I've gone from being probably the most popular politician because of the vaccine program in the country, with many in this room writing lovely things about me, to someone who had the same journalist camped outside their house and write some very painful things. And I expect there will be some who want to obviously go over those issues when I sit down. And of course, I have always supported the right of a free press. But my point is that I could choose a quiet, comfortable retirement out of the headlines, chairing one of Britain's biggest online retailers, helping out the Adam Smith Institute, and of course investing heavily both here in the UK and internationally. But I also know a thing or two about growing up in a country that is fundamentally broken, riven by sectarian strife, economic depression, and cratering living standards. So I have decided not to stand by and watch that happen to the country that took me in and let me live my British dream. Not when so many of my countrymen are instead living the waking nightmare of Keir Starmer's two-tier Britain. So I stand here with the leader of my new party to offer my help and my insights to the dynamic, confident team that Nigel Farage is building, and to urge others from across all the other parties, and the many millions who until now felt that politics isn't for them, to come and join us. Come and join us. You know Britain is broken. You know it needs reform. Since leaving Parliament, I have been reflecting on the successes and failures of my old party's time in government. I now rue the timidity, even at times the weakness, with which we tried to deal with the problems of the country. My analysis is that a huge culprit is the overmighty bureaucratic inertia that now dominates and runs the country, that has taken control of swathes of the economy, and with barely a shrug of the shoulders, restricted the individual liberty of each and every one of us. and we believed them. Now, I have always been the first to defend the civil servants who served me across multiple departments, and I will always do that. Individually, they are some of the most dedicated, talented, and capable people I've ever had the privilege to work with. But taken as a whole, we have an administrative state, including the overpowerful regulators, the quangos, and all the other agencies who have had power pushed onto them by successive parliaments and governments. These parliaments have been full of politicians terrified of the awesome power and the sacred responsibility that the British Constitution bestowed upon our ancient and sovereign parliament. This has meant that we have ignored the words of John 9:4, to work the work of the day while we can, because the night is certainly coming. So it is time for another glorious revolution to get us back to a fully sovereign parliament, and where the government really is the government. For that, my friends, Britain needs reform. My old party, and by definition, to some extent, me personally, should share some blame for the continuation of the Blairite constitutional vandalism and our failure, to coin a phrase, to take back control from the entrenched powers of the unelected bureaucracy. Now, Conservatives did some important work, stabilizing the economy in the early years after Tony Blair's and Gordon Brown's destructive reign, reforming education and welfare, supporting Ukraine, and of course dealing with the pandemic as well as we could. But failures on mass migration, failure to strengthen our armed forces, or even protect special forces from insane government lawyers, and bad virtue-signaling legislation that has made us less competitive and less prosperous, to name but a few. These have provided me with painful lessons learnt that I will, I hope, benefit this great new team. One other lesson I have learnt from ruminating on my time in government is this: we should have been much more forthright about what we really think. I came into politics from a business background where straight talking was what you did. I probably picked up too much of the bizarre politician speak of trying to talk around an issue rather than tackle it head on. So I'm going to be open about my real unvarnished fears for the country, because what has happened in the last 18 months has terrified me. We have a Prime Minister whose first instinct is to trust foreign judges over British people. We have an Attorney General who says he would never block the ECHR, even presumably when it forces us to take back Shamima Begum and prevent us from deporting foreign child rapists. We have a Chancellor who does not understand economic growth, and a parliamentary Labour Party who, through their lack of engagement with the real world, or even seemingly living in it, actively despise the capitalist activity that to many millions of us is human, moral, creative, and dynamic. We have an energy secretary who couldn't be doing more damage to our living standards and our economy if he was actively trying to hurt us. We have an education secretary who has thrown out 20 years of political consensus on education policy, one that has made English schools the best in the whole Western world, sacrificing your child's future on the altar of her slavish devotion to the trade unions and her ambition to winning their support, of course, at the upcoming Labour leadership election. We have a Justice Secretary who once said that Brexiteers like me were worse than Nazis, and who's throwing out an ancient liberty of this land in the form of jury trials, all whilst locking up people on Twitter. We have a Foreign Secretary giving away sovereign British territory, just as the world gets more dangerous and we are menaced by, first amongst others, a Russia that cares not a jot for words, it only respects strength. We have a Health Secretary who's ploughing ahead with giving children life-destroying hormone blockers, even though we know conclusively now know the damage that they do. And of course, worse, as calamitous as this shower of a government is. There are radical Islamists waiting in the wings to supplant half the cabinet at the next general election and enter parliament. Is there not still a teacher in hiding in Batley? Is there not an attempt by the CPS to introduce blasphemy laws via the back door? Just last week, did we not learn that a police force whose response to uncovering a plot by a group of Muslims in the West Midlands to organise into an armed militia and commit pogrom against Jewish football fans was to lie to the public and to blame the Jews? This is a sickness deep in the heart of our country that for 40 years we have let fester. We should have nipped political Islam in Britain in the bud the moment there were protests against an author for the crime of writing a book. Some of the biggest victims of these Muslim Brotherhood fanatics may be the millions of moderate, decent, patriotic British Muslims. And they may be, as we have seen, Britain's Jewish community too. But my friends, make no mistake, the rest of the country are every bit as much in their sights too. And the only political leader who has spoken up about this at great personal threat, who has pledged to ban the Muslim Brotherhood and the whole sinister fifth column in Britain, Nigel Farage, the man sitting by me now. I'm inspired by his willingness to say difficult truths rather than hide behind a comfortable lie. I'm inspired by the fact that he and his team understand the radical changes required on our economy to save us from the impending debt trap. I'm inspired by their understanding that we need a foreign policy, one that ruthlessly seeks the British national interest. I'm inspired by their concern over the broiling social tensions out there in the country, and in my view, the undervalued risk of sustained civil unrest if we don't get back on track. In short, ladies and gentlemen, I'm inspired by reform. Our best days can lie ahead, they really can, and we can move into a glorious future. But at the moment, Britain is broken. Britain needs reform. I have joined this movement to put my shoulder to the wheel to help it. I encourage others to join us too. Thank you very much indeed.
Nadhim, thank you and welcome on board. Right, we have the usual list of questions, beginning with Ian Watson from the BBC.
Thank you. First question to Nadhim Zahawi. Obviously, nobody doubts your acumen as a businessman, but you were sacked as Conservative Party chair for your tax affairs and what you said about your tax affairs. Do you really provide the right image for a party that's meant to be anti-establishment? And to Nigel, I can ask you as well. Today, on substance, today the Labour Party is introducing necessary legislation to give people parental rights from day one in the job. Is that something you would reverse if you came to power? And on another topic today, Ofcom in the past 20 minutes has announced that it is investigating Grok X. Do you welcome that investigation?
Thank you, Ian. I wrote a book about my time in government and about my final chapter, my departing government as chairman of the party. I built a great business in YouGov, and at some stage HMRC decided that I needed to pay more tax on that business, which I did. I had a choice, of course, by the way, which is to instruct my accountants to challenge HMRC, but of course they were reporting into me as Chancellor, and that's why I decided actually the appropriate thing to do was to settle. The mistake I made is not to be specific about the settlement in my declarations to the Cabinet Office, and I deal with that in detail in my book. And I absolutely think that politicians should be held to a higher level of accountability, but I shouldn't be precluded from doing the right thing via my country, and I think I've got a set of talents and experiences that I can lend the team that Nigel's building to be able to get this country back on track.
Yeah, it's the big difference really between here and America. And by the way, America's growing at 4.3%. That was the last figure we saw, and we're not growing at all. And in America, we accept that people have companies that fail. In fact, most successful Americans boast about how many failures they've had. And I saw Layla Cunningham being attacked by the media because a couple of her investments in firms haven't worked. So what? You know, that's what it's all about. She risked her money. Some you win, some you lose. And there's nobody with a complex business empire that does not have to have negotiations at some point with HMRC. That is how the world works. And I'd much rather have Nadhim, who's been through that experience and come out the other end. And he could have just gone abroad. He could have just disappeared for a few years and not paid any tax, which, by the way, increasingly is what people are doing. So, yeah, you know, we've got a very, very broad range of people in this party, but I'm pleased to say we've got several people in the upper echelons of reform who've been successful in business, unlike the government, where not one of them has. I'm all for parental rights. It's just all about what that balance and relationship is with employers. And I think, you know, what we've seen with the employment rights legislation thus far in this government is employer after employer saying, we will take on fewer people. And the rapid rise of youth unemployment, I think, bears testament to that already. On Grok, I mean, nothing from the current set of regulators and government would surprise me when it comes to the suppression of free speech. Do we like and welcome the particular feature on Grok that's made the news over the weekend? No, but let's talk to Grok. They've already made one or two steps in our direction. My fear is we'll end up suppressing Grok and further suppressing free speech, and we do not want to do that. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Thank you, Catherine Forster, GB News. Nadine Zahawi, a few years ago, you tweeted, "I'm not British-born, Mr. Nigel Farage. I am as British as you are. Your comments are offensive and racist. I would be frightened to live in a country run by you." Why the change of heart? And this was 2015.
Oh, quite recent then, thank you. Yeah.
Well, just asking about the change of heart. And also on Iran, Mr. Farage, would you support Britain potentially